Hey everyone, Matt here with Duke's Models, and welcome to part 6 of the Kinetic Hornet build review. This time out, we'll be tackling the landing gear. So let's kick this party off with the nose gear. As you can see, Kinetic provides one illustration of how this goes together. Go ahead and clean up the parts. As usual, the trimming, scraping, etc. And this piece locks in here. This is one where the illustration lets me down, as we'll get to in a little bit. Then these little linkage arms go in. Again, some small problems with Kinetic wanting to really cure with the Tamiya extra thin. Let's use a clamp there to hold it down for a little bit of extra time. More support elements going in, and let's let that sit for a little bit. And work on the nose wheels. So Kinetic has this interesting sort of sandwich method where they've got the hub represented on both sides, and you put the tires around it. Works well enough for the nose gear, even though I think the hubs look a little tiny bit small. Here's the second one. And let's get back to this nose gear piece. Now if you look at this H27 piece on the bottom, this is where things get kind of interesting. H27 is supposed to go in there, but it's supposed to go in before that other piece kind of locks in. Well, that's not going to happen here, so turning to Bondic, cut the little locking piece off of the post, and we're just going to use the post itself. Again, this is one where, Kinetic could have provided a better angle, some more visual guidance, whatever. But it's not that hard to fix this piece. Now we're dealing with fitting the landing light. This piece is a fully encapsulated, or this piece is a 100% clear piece, so you want to glue it in and then mask it before painting. And here we go. It's nice and installed. Easy peasy. Time to put in some photo etch. You can see how it's supposed to go in here. Of course, Kinetic is forgetting a few things like, really showing in a good diagram where this stuff goes, and the gear bay is missing some of the details that show where to place this stuff, which is frustrating. So it kind of goes here, sorta-ish. It's almost like they were basing the drawing and the placement off of a different gear bay. This one forgets about, the little mounting guides for the nose gear, doors, and all that stuff. Now we've got this front actuator arm. It's a bit of a tight fit, so I had to sand it up a little bit. Once you do that, it still takes pressure to get this in, but once it's in, it's nice and locked in. And it will eventually help locate those two forward nose gear doors. Let's get this sucker in. Now this is a part where Kinetic proves especially frustrating. These nose gear doors just have essentially little sticks hanging off of them that represent the hinges, and they mount to those little sort of location slats in the bay itself. What I would have really preferred is more of like an L bracket type of thing that actually goes back into the bay a little bit so you have much more positive location. You know, a lot of kit makers use that sort of approach, and it's fantastic. Kinetic doesn't, and that makes gluing these things in, especially gluing them in with minimal glue, you know, white glue or little dabs of super glue or something like that after they've been painted, significantly more challenging. Now, this is a minor quibble, but it's one of those things when you're looking at build friendliness and the ability to paint these things off of the kit and then install them near the end. It's tough to do that when you're dealing with, you know, solvent cements like Tamiya Extra Thin or MEK or something like that. So I would call that a mark against Kinetic in their engineering. You know, one of the relatively few ones in this kit that I've encountered so far. And this is the fun thing of trying to film a build, is you get full shots of hands. But here we've got the nose doors going in place. As you can see, again, the positive location aspects of this are a bit of a challenge, especially with that actuator arm exerting its pressure from one side. You know, sort of an L bracket to slot back into the fuselage, into the bay would be really, really appreciated at this point. In fact, you know, as a full build, I would recommend even investigating adding that. Okay, let's move on to the main gear. Now, again, we've got some interesting instructions here showing that you just glue these various support struts onto the main gear strut. We've also got, look, there's E. We're looking for E21, right? E21 is not at all that support arm. It's over here on a different sprue. Thanks, Kinetic. So if you try to mount that arm to the main strut, it just won't work for installing it, because it actually goes into the main gear bay. There's a little hole here up under the front ledge that it slots into. So again, that's not something that they really show you in the instructions, and you pretty much have to work it out for yourself. Again, the importance of test fitting and reading ahead before committing to glue with this build cannot be overstated. So here we're looking at how this links up once you have those pieces already placed where they need to go. So as much as I don't want to, I'm having to commit to glue at this early stage. You know, Hornet landing gear, along with a lot of these other landing gear that sit at sort of strange angles, are not a thing that's really fun to get aligned so the aircraft sits level. So having to commit to something like this kind of as a one-off before I can really get everything locked in is frustrating. The main struts themselves do float a little bit in their mounting holes. This is one where I think Kinetic really could have benefited from using either larger or deeper mounting posts for those main gear struts to provide much stronger, you know, more accurate alignment. This arm is another slight frustration. It doesn't quite seat the way I would like it to. There's a lot of little micro manipulations going on with the gear struts to make everything work and fit, but we eventually get there. Now let's work on the main wheels. So again, we've got this sort of middle hub thing going on and the two wheel halves. With these, it's interesting because as you get them together, A, there's some floatiness of the hub in the actual wheel itself, and B, there is a gap around the tread. And because of the way the hub is designed, this isn't really something you can sand away. You might be able to shim the wheel itself, but I mean, that's a pain in the ass. Given that the actual wheels themselves look pretty small in the tire compared to the real thing, this is a point where I would certainly recommend considering some aftermarket resin. Now moving on to the gear doors, again you can see it's just sort of the vertical post. Now I have a nice fun bit here gluing this in and screwing it up completely. So I'm just trying to work one piece at a time here, and I wasn't paying adequate attention to what goes on in the instructions. So get this guy glued in place. As you can see, these just the vertical post really do not help with getting alignment nailed on these parts, especially when I'm not putting them in the right place. More glue. You see this thing continues to be floppy. Again, the L bracket to sort of lock this truly in place would be much appreciated. But here's where you run into trouble. Once you go to put these aft doors on, you realize, oh fuck, there's a gap there. And what that gap means is that those front doors are too far up. So they've got to come off. Fortunately, you know, you act fast before the glue has really cured, and you can pull them off. So do that and replace it in the proper position. There are actually some little indents there that guide you where it needs to go. Then go ahead and glue in these aft doors. These actually fit relatively better than the nose doors for some reason. I think it's just smaller, so it's not as much weight pulling it in different directions. And then we've got these actuators. These fit pretty well into the fuselage. They're definitely something that you want to glue down nice and solid, but they do help with locating the gear doors against them, because they seat in a specific way, and they seat into the gear doors with little holes. So once you get to that point, and once you can lock them down, everything's golden. Let's see, fixing it from this side as well, adding this door, adding the arms, mounting everything up. It's just super fucking fragile. It's an overly fussy approach, and honestly, the thing that freaks me out most about this kit is trying to do all of this with parts that have already been painted and weathered and all that good stuff. You know, it's one thing to slather this with solvent cement, like to me extra thin. It's another thing to try to manage this when the doors already have the insides white, the borders in red, and you're trying to deal with all this with, either some sort of PVA glue or tiny amounts of super glue. But eventually we get to the point where the doors are installed and the wheels go on next. The wheels fit pretty well. I ended up using extra thin for these as well, just having a place to set them. Once they set up a little bit, I turned it onto its tires and let everything align with just the nature of the plane sitting there. Worked well enough. Now we're moving on to a few of these underside details. So the shaft dispensers, there is the option for a double shaft dispenser. Kinetic doesn't tell you which aircraft call for it and which don't, which is super awesome and helpful. Thanks, guys. So I just opted to go with the singles this time out. Let those do their thing. And then we've got these little fairings that are going to go in place. Look at that sprue location. That's fun, huh? Cleaning that up on that little edge. Well, got that cleaned up. And put it there, lock it in place. Same on the other side. A little bit of extra thin. Hold it in to make sure it fully sets. Moving on to the back, we've got the Arrestor Hook. Now, the Arrestor Hook has some little ribbings on it to help you mask and paint this, the sort of stripe that it has on it. And the fit is decent. A little bit of cement at the hinge, and there we go. So overall, the landing gear is definitely a frustrating prospect with this build. I would say it's far and away, at least so far, the worst aspect of the build that I've encountered. The fit everywhere else is pretty solid with the exception of the intake trunks. The landing gear are super fiddly, and they're one of those things that, just given the way that people normally put landing gear in and they install landing gear doors, all that usually comes after paint. Installing these fuckers after paint just seems like a total nightmare scenario at this point. But again, I think maybe modifying the doors, those hinges a little bit so there's that L shape and something to actually slot into the fuselage and gear bay as opposed to kind of just positioning it against would be really helpful. But once it's all said and done, it does sit on its wheels. So, gotta give it credit for that, right? And with that, we're going to scoot right along to part 7, where we'll be working on the various pylons that will go under the wings and under the center fuselage.